The air in Incheon International Airport's VIP arrivals terminal smelled of three things: industrial-grade floor polish, the faint, kerosene-tinged perfume of distant jet fuel, and money. The money smell was the most complex, a layered scent of expensive leather from waiting drivers' gloves, the subtle cologne of men who measured their worth in quarterly reports, and the clean, crisp aroma of freshly printed currency that seemed to seep from the very walls of the private customs hall. For Imani Adebayo, it mostly smelled like survival. She stood perfectly still, a silent statue in a navy blue uniform that was professionally crisp but tailored for a body less curved, a frame less statuesque than her own. It was a constant low-grade reminder of her place in this ecosystem, a functional object, not a person. Her dark mahogany skin seemed to absorb the cool, recessed lighting, and her hair was pulled back into a severe bun, not a single coil daring to escape its disciplined prison. On a small, elegant sign held in her capable hands, white letters spelled out a name: K. Bawon Ji Han. Behind the name was a number: $172,500. That was the total, the cost of 6 cycles of an experimental immunotherapy for the woman who had raised her, loved her, and now lay in a quiet hospital bed in Philadelphia, her body betraying her with a quiet, cellular violence. Nana. The number was an impossible mountain, and this job, this position of smiling servitude, was her pickaxe. Each deferential nod, each swallowed retort, each wealthy traveler she guided through this gilded purgatory was another chip of stone off the mountain. The base pay was insulting. The tips, however, were not. The clients she handled were men and women for whom a $1,000 bill was the emotional equivalent of a thank you note. She was counting on that casual, thoughtless generosity. Her Nana's life was counting on it. Imani si. The voice was a nervous hiss. Her supervisor, Mr. Kim, scurried to her side, his own uniform wilted with a permanent sheen of sweat. He was a man perpetually terrified of shadows, and today the shadow had a name. You remember the briefing, yes? This is not Mr. Henderson from Texas with his loud jokes. This is not Madame Dubois with her yapping poodle. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that reeked of stale coffee and fear. This is Kwon Ji-han, from the Dragon's Head family. Imani didn't react, her gaze fixed on the frosted glass doors of the jet bridge. She knew the name, not just from Mr. Kim's frantic morning email. In her former life, a life that felt like it belonged to another woman in another century, the name Kwon was whispered in secure, soundproofed rooms in Langley. It was a name associated with the shadowy corners of global shipping, finance, and less savory enterprises. The Dragon's Head, the Yongdu Pa, was not a corporation. It was a dynasty, one of the old-school syndicates that operated with the ruthless efficiency of a nation-state. He is to be handled with absolute perfection, Kim stressed, wringing his hands. No mistakes, no delays. He values punctuality. His father, the chairman, very traditional, very powerful. Yes, sir. Imani's voice was a low, smooth murmur, deferential, empty. The voice she wore with the uniform. Just get him to his car, that's all. Straight to the car. His security is already here. Imani knew. She had clocked them 20 minutes ago. 2 men in dark, nondescript suits pretending to read newspapers near the currency exchange. Another near the exit, speaking quietly into his cuff. They moved with a placid economy that screamed professional training, their eyes never resting, constantly mapping the space. They were invisible to the civilian eye, but to her, they were as loud as neon signs. A flicker of memory, unwanted and sharp. Her foster father, Detective Park, setting up a chessboard in their small Busan apartment. Always see the whole board, Imani ya, he'd say, his voice a low rumble. Never just your own pieces. See where they are, where they could go. That is how you survive. She had survived. She had left that world of analysis and shadows, of predicting the moves of men like Kwon Ji-han from behind a government computer, only to find herself waiting to carry his briefcase. The irony was a bitter acid in her throat. She had gotten too close, her investigation into a certain shipping consortium raising flags in the uncomfortable places. A quiet dismissal, a professional blacklisting, and the life she had built was gone. Now, this. From seeing the whole board to being a pawn on it. The frosted glass doors hissed open. A river of business-class passengers flowed out, their faces etched with the fatigue of a trans-Pacific flight. They moved with entitlement, pulling roller bags that cost more than Imani's monthly rent. She held the sign a little higher, her posture unchanging. Then, the river slowed to a trickle. A space cleared around the doorway, an invisible parting of the waters. The air itself seemed to still, holding its breath. He appeared. Quan Jihan did not walk. He moved like a predator, with a silent, fluid grace that was unnervingly deliberate. He was flanked by two more men, both built like brick walls in tailored suits, their faces utterly blank. The room, already quiet, dropped a level deeper into silence. Airport staff who had been bustling moments before suddenly found tasks to do with their heads down. This was not just a rich man. This was power, raw and absolute. He was tall, his frame lean but broad in the shoulders, encased in a charcoal suit so exquisitely cut it seemed to be a part of him. It probably cost the price of one of Nana's treatment cycles. His black hair was styled with an effortless precision. He wore no jewelry, save for a watch on his left wrist. A Patek Philippe. The kind of watch that could pay off Imani's entire mountain of debt with enough left over for a house. He paused, ignoring her completely, and adjusted his cuff, the brief movement a small, perfect ritual of command. Only then did his eyes lift. They were cold. Not angry, not cruel, just empty. The eyes of a man who assessed everything for its value and threat, and for whom most things registered as neither. For a brief, terrifying second, his gaze swept over her, and she felt the full, crushing weight of her own invisibility. She was furniture, part of the service. Imani took a small, preparatory breath and stepped forward, her professional smile clicking into place. This was the moment the performance began. But the performance was interrupted. From the thinning crowd of passengers, a man stumbled sideways, lurching out of the stream. He was American, his face flushed with the telltale signs of too many in-flight whiskeys. A gaudy designer shirt was untucked, and he moved with the sloppy arrogance of a man used to buying his way out of consequences. He collided with Imani, not hard, but enough to make her brace herself. A dark liquid, whiskey from the smell of it, sloshed from a plastic cup in his hand, splashing onto the sleeve of her pristine white shirt. "Hey, watch it, sweetheart," he slurred, steadying himself. Then his eyes focused on her face, on her skin, and a slow, stupid smirk spread across his lips. "Oh, my bad. It's kinda dark over here. Almost didn't see you." His friends, two equally obnoxious clones in expensive casual wear, snickered behind him. The sound was ugly. Imani went rigid. The professional smile vanished, replaced by a mask of perfect neutrality. Every muscle in her body locked down. It was a practiced response, a shield she had perfected over months in this job. Do not engage. Do not react. Become a stone. The man, Sterling he'd be called later, wasn't finished. He reached out and his fingers, surprisingly strong, clamped around her wrist. The grip was tight, possessive, painful. "You work here, right?" he asked, his voice loud, deliberately slow, as if speaking to a child or an idiot. "Get me another drink and a cart for my bags. Chop chop." 3 seconds. That was the rule she had made for herself in these moments. 3 seconds to feel the fire, the rage, the humiliation. 3 seconds to let the acid burn in her throat. 3 seconds to choose between the crushing weight of Nana's medical bills and the screaming need to maintain her own soul. 1. The memory of his words. "Didn't see you." 2. The bite of his fingers into the delicate bones of her wrist. The casual ownership. 3. The image of Nana's tired, hopeful smile. The choice was always the same. Survival. She tried to pull her arm back, a slow, gentle disengagement. He tightened his grip instantly, a predator feeling its prey struggle. The bones in her wrist ground together. A sharp, bright spike of pain shot up her arm. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded, leaning in, his breath sour. "I'm talking to you. Don't you people understand English?" Mr. Kim was suddenly there, bowing and scraping. "My sincerest apologies, sir. So sorry for the inconvenience. She is new, very clumsy. Please, allow me. But Sterling wasn't looking at Kim. He was enjoying this, performing for his friends. Humiliating her was sport. Across the small space, Kwon Ji-han and his men had stopped. They were watching the entire exchange. Ji-han's expression hadn't changed. His cold eyes were fixed on the point where Sterling's pale, fleshy hand was wrapped around Imani's dark wrist. He was assessing, calculating. A predator watching another, lesser predator, play with its food. He hadn't intervened. He hadn't moved. He was simply observing. The silence from his direction was more intimidating than any shout. Imani kept her eyes forward, fixed on a point on the far wall. She would endure this. She would take the man's bags, get him his drink, and then she would go to the restroom and scrub her skin until it was raw. She would add this small, sharp shard of degradation to the pile she was collecting, the price of Nana's life. But something was different this time. Maybe it was the sheer, unvarnished racism of it. Maybe it was the bone-deep weariness of having to be small, to be invisible, day after day. Or maybe it was the sight of Kwon Ji-han, a man from a world she once understood, watching her in this state of abject powerlessness. The 3-second countdown was over. Survival had won, as it always did. But today, a rebellion was stirring in its blood. Kwon Ji-han took a single, deliberate step forward. The sound of his leather shoe on the polished marble was a pronouncement. The air crackled. His men tensed, their hands shifting almost imperceptibly inside their jackets. "Let her go." His voice was not loud. It was a quiet, deadly thing, spoken in perfect, unaccented English. It sliced through the terminal's ambient noise and landed with the force of a physical blow. Sterling, drunk and insulated by a lifetime of privilege, turned. He looked Ji-han up and down, a sneer on his face. He saw an impeccably dressed Asian man and his entourage, and his brain, pickled in alcohol and arrogance, processed it as a challenge from another local. "And who the hell are you?" Sterling retorted, puffing out his chest. "Her boyfriend? Mind your own business." He gave Imani's wrist a vicious shake for emphasis. The pain was nauseating. This was the moment, the pivot. Ji-han would say something else, his men would move, and the incident would be over. Imani would be saved, a damsel in distress, indebted and further diminished in the eyes of the very man she was supposed to be impressing with her competence. She would be a problem he had to solve, a piece of luggage he had to manage. No, not this time. In the split second before Ji-han could respond, Imani acted. The decision was not a thought, but a physical impulse, a seismic shift deep within her. The mask of neutrality didn't just crack, it disintegrated. The years of practiced deference fell away like a shed skin. She lifted her head. Her spine, which had been held in a posture of subservience, straightened. It was a small movement, but it changed everything. She was no longer a cowering servant. She was a queen in a cheap uniform. She turned her eyes, no longer vacant but burning with a cold, intelligent fire, away from her tormentor, and fixed them directly on Kwon Ji-han. She ignored Sterling as if he were a piece of furniture. Speaking in flawless, formal Korean, her voice was clear and carried the weight of authority. The accent was precise, cultured, but underneath it was a hard, distinct edge, the unmistakable cadence of Busan. 죄송합니다, 권 선생님. I 무례한 자 때문에 시간이 지체되었습니다. 바로 처리하겠습니다. My apologies, Mr. Kwon. This rude person has caused a delay. I will handle it immediately. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb being disarmed. Sterling's jaw went slack, his drunken bravado evaporating. His friends froze mid-snicker. Mr. Kim looked as if he might actually faint, his face a mask of pure terror. Even Ji-han's 2 stoic guards registered a flicker of shock. And Ji-han's cold eyes widened. It was a microscopic change, a barely perceptible widening of his pupils, but on his face of glacial control, it was like a crack appearing in a glacier. He had expected a victim. He had found something else entirely. Imani was not finished. She lowered her gaze from Ji-han's face to Sterling's hand, still clamped around her wrist. The contrast was stark, his flushed pale skin against her own deep brown. She spoke again, but the language changed. The formal, respectful Korean was gone. In its place was something else, something rougher. The informal, guttural language of the street, of the docks, of men who solve problems with their fists. "I son en Mawe," she commanded, her voice deadly quiet. "Let go of this hand." She held his gaze. "Jugi Siliumyan. If you don't want to die." Sterling understood nothing of the words, but he understood the tone. It was the universal language of imminent violence. He released her wrist as if he'd been electrocuted, stumbling back a step. A dark red imprint of his fingers was already beginning to bloom on her skin. Without another glance at him, Imani turned back to Quan Jihan. She gave a perfect 90-degree bow, the picture of traditional respect. The whiplash of her transformation was dizzying. "This way, sir," she said in crisp English, as if nothing had happened. She gestured toward the exit, her hand, the one with the angry red marks, steady. Jihan stared at her for a long, unreadable moment. Then, a ghost of something, not a smile, but a flicker of profound interest, passed through his eyes. He gave a single sharp nod, and he followed her. The ride from the airport was in a black Maybach sedan that smelled of new leather and old power. The windows were tinted to an opaque black, sealing them in a cocoon of absolute privacy. Imani sat on the jump seat, facing Quan Jihan and one of his guards. The other sat in the front. No one spoke. The silence was thick, heavy with unspoken questions. Imani kept her gaze directed at her own hands, folded neatly in her lap. She deliberately placed the hand with the red marks underneath the other, a futile attempt to hide the evidence of her humiliation. The car moved through the city with an effortless, liquid speed. Jihan hadn't looked at her since they'd entered the vehicle. He stared out the window, his profile as sharp and unforgiving as cut glass. Imani felt his silence as a physical presence, a weight in the small space. He was dissecting what had happened. He was analyzing her. She had gambled, showing a card she had kept hidden for years. Now she had to wait and see if it had won her the pot or gotten her shot. Finally, as the car slowed in the dense traffic of Gangnam, he spoke. He didn't turn his head. His voice, when it came, was a low murmur, and it was in Korean. "You have an interesting accent." Imani met his reflection in the tinted window. "My foster father was a detective. He was stationed in Busan for 20 years. She offered no more. Let him work for it. His eyes in the reflection met hers. "A detective's daughter, and the airport pays you to greet fools?" There was no judgment in his tone. It was a simple factual inquiry. He was collecting data. "The airport pays me," she replied, her voice even. "That is all that matters." It was a half-truth. The money was the chain, but the indignity was the lock. She didn't say that. She didn't need to. He was a man who understood chains. He turned from the window then, facing her fully for the first time. The full force of his attention was like a physical touch. His cold eyes roamed her face, her uniform, and finally, her hands, folded in her lap. With a small, almost imperceptible gesture, he indicated them. "Show me your wrist." It was not a request. Slowly, Imani unfolded her hands. The red marks from Sterling's grip had deepened into the beginnings of a bruise, a clear handprint marring her skin. She didn't flinch or look away. She held his gaze, her expression unreadable. He looked at the bruise for a long time. The silence stretched. His guard remained as still as stone, his eyes fixed forward. "That man," Jihan said, his voice dropping another register, becoming something colder, sharper. "Sterling. His company is Sterling Applied Dynamics. They are in negotiations with the Sun-Hee Trading Group." Imani's mind, the old analytical part of her that she had tried to suppress, clicked on instantly. The Sun-Hee Group was a known rival of the Yongdu-pa, a newer, more reckless faction trying to muscle in on traditional territories, particularly shipping and logistics. "I want to know everything about his deal," Jihan continued. "The real deal, not the one in the press releases. I want to know what he's really selling them. I want to know his weaknesses. I want to know what he fears." He paused, his eyes still on her bruised wrist. "You have observational skills, and you are fluent in more than one language." This was it. The offer. The trade. "I am offering you a new position," he stated. "You will work for me. You will find what I need. In return," he let the word hang in the air. Imani felt her heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against her ribs. This was a door opening into a world she had run from, a world of danger and consequence. But it was also a world of power, a world where men like Sterling didn't get to grab your wrist without repercussions. She would not be a grateful servant. She would be a partner, a contractor. "What are the terms?" she asked, her voice steady. Her Korean was as formal and precise as his. A flicker of surprise. He had expected her to ask about salary. Instead, she was asking for a contract. "You will be given any resource you require," he said. "Access, information, equipment. You will be protected. As for your current employer," he made a small dismissive gesture, "Mr. Kim will be informed that your services are no longer available to him. He will not object." Imani thought of Nana, of the mountain of debt. This was a lifeline. But a lifeline from a shark is still attached to a shark. She had to set the terms. All of them. "I have a financial obligation," she said, her voice betraying nothing of the desperation she felt. "A personal matter. It requires $172,500 American dollars. She named the specific unrounded number. It gave it weight. Truth. The guard's head tilted a fraction of a degree. It was a staggering sum. An outrageous demand from a woman who was, until an hour ago, an airport concierge. Jihan didn't blink. He simply held her gaze, calculating. He was weighing her potential value against the cost. He was looking at her, really looking at her, and seeing not a uniform, not a race, not a gender, but an asset, a weapon. "Up front," Imani added, pressing her advantage. Her voice was quiet, but the demand was audacious. "Transferred to an account of my choosing, today." The silence returned, thicker than before. She had laid her cards on the table. It was a bluff built on a foundation of genuine skill, a gamble on her own worth. Jihan leaned back against the plush leather. For a moment she thought he would laugh, or tell the driver to stop and throw her out. Instead, he reached into his suit jacket and removed a sleek black satellite phone. He typed a few commands, his thumb moving with deft precision. A moment later, a notification pinged on the cheap second-hand phone in Imani's pocket. She didn't look at it. She didn't have to. "The account number?" Jihan asked, his voice flat. Imani recited the string of digits for the hospital's international payment portal. Her voice didn't tremble. He typed again, then put the phone away. "It is done." Just like that. A mountain leveled in a moment. The breath she had been holding for months escaped her in a slow, silent sigh. The relief was so profound it was painful, but she did not let it show on her face. The deal was done. Her new life had begun. "Your first task," Jihan said, his tone shifting back to business, "is to get close to Sterling. We have booked you a suite at the Shilla, same floor as his. Your cover is as a freelance acquisitions consultant, specializing in the tech mergers. Your credentials have already been created. A car is waiting for you at the hotel." He paused. "And you will need a new wardrobe." He gestured to her uniform, to the dark splash of whiskey, to the ill-fitting blazer. "From now on," Kwon Jihan declared, his eyes holding hers, "you will never be invisible again." The Shilla Hotel was another world. The air smelled of white lilies and subtle, expensive cedar. Marble floors gleamed under soft, gallery-quality lighting. Imani's suite was larger than her entire apartment. A sprawling living area, a bedroom with a cloud-like king-size bed, and a bathroom clad in Italian marble with a tub deep enough to drown in. On the bed, laid out with surgical precision, were garment bags from Shinsegae's most exclusive designer floors, dresses, tailored pantsuits, silk blouses, and shoes that were works of art. There was also a laptop, a slim, powerful slate of matte black metal, and a burn phone. Her old life was in a crumpled heap on the floor. The navy blue uniform, the sensible shoes, the name tag that read Imani. She left it there. Showering, she scrubbed at her wrist, but the bruise remained, a faint, ugly shadow. A reminder. She stepped out, wrapped in a thick white robe, and looked at her reflection. The woman staring back was someone she hadn't seen in a long time. The tension was gone from her shoulders. The fear was gone from her eyes, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. She chose a simple, elegant black pantsuit. The fabric was a heavy crepe that draped over her curves as if it were woven for her. It felt like armor. She sat at the desk, opened the laptop, and went to work. Kwon Jihan had provided a seed file. It contained everything his organization had on Sterling Applied Dynamics and the Sun He Group. It was thorough but superficial, public filings, news articles, known associates. It was the skeleton. Imani's job was to put flesh on it, find the nerves, and locate the jugular. For the next 10 hours, she disappeared into the work. The skills she had honed at Langley, the instincts taught by Detective Park over a chessboard, all came rushing back. It felt like breathing after being held underwater. She cross-referenced shipping manifests with shell corporations registered in Panama. She analyzed Sterling's travel patterns against known meetings of Sun-He operatives. She ran social media profiles of his executive team through facial recognition software, linking them to faces seen in the background of photos taken at known money-laundering hotspots in Macau. A pattern began to emerge. Sterling wasn't just selling the Sun-He Group some advanced robotics patents. The declared value of the deal was a drop in the bucket compared to the money flowing through the shell corporations. This wasn't industrial espionage, this was a pipeline. Sterling's tech company was a high-end laundromat for the Sun-He Group's less-than-legal income streams, and the money was being consolidated for a single, massive purpose. She found it buried in a chain of encrypted emails she managed to access through a backdoor in Sterling's corporate server. A vulnerability she had flagged in a report 2 years ago, a report her superiors had ignored. The Sun-He Group was planning a hostile takeover of the Busan Port Authority, a port that was, for all intents and purposes, the crown jewel of the Kwan family's legitimate empire. This was not a business deal. This was a declaration of war. Sterling wasn't a partner. He was the weapon they were using to fire the first shot. A soft chime from the burn phone. A single text from an unknown number. He is in the hotel bar, now. Imani stood. She looked at the screen, at the web of crime she had unraveled in less than a day. She looked at her own reflection in the dark screen, the woman in the designer suit. She picked up her room key. It was time for phase 2. The hotel bar was a study in hushed opulence. Dark wood, low lighting, the clink of heavy crystal. Sterling was at a corner table, holding court with his 2 lackeys. He was louder than everyone else, his laughter a harsh, braying sound. He was already several drinks in. Imani walked in. She didn't hesitate. She moved with the same deliberate grace Jihan had, a borrowed confidence that was quickly becoming her own. She felt the eyes of the room turn to her, a tall, stunning black woman in a suit that cost more than their car, moving with the purpose of someone who owned the space. She walked directly to the bar, presenting her back to Sterling's table, and ordered a glass of Macallan 18. She took her time, letting the bartender pour it, savoring the anticipation. She could feel Sterling's gaze on her. She heard his friend's low murmurs. Finally, she turned, glass in hand, and leaned against the bar, surveying the room as if searching for someone. Her eyes swept past Sterling's table, then came back, as if in surprise. She let a small, polite smile touch her lips and walked toward them. "Mr. Sterling?" she asked, her voice smooth as velvet. American accent, East Coast, educated. Sterling stared, his jaw slack for the second time in 24 hours. He was looking at her, but he wasn't seeing her. He saw the suit, the confidence, the expensive whiskey. He did not see the airport concierge. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Imani continued, her smile unwavering. "My name is Anaya Locke. I'm a consultant with Blackwood Capital. I recognized you from the cover of Forbes. I was so impressed with the article about your work in applied dynamics. The transformation was so complete, so absolute, that his brain could not make the connection. She was a different person. Anaya Locke was a person of his world, a person of value." Yeah, that's me," he stammered, scrambling to his feet, suddenly the awkward tech bro, and not the lord of the manor. "Please join us." Imani smiled. "I'd be delighted." She sat down, and the game began. For the next week, Imani became Anaya Locke. She was brilliant, charming, and utterly convincing. She ran into Sterling in the gym. She sat near him at breakfast, discussing fictional multi-million-dollar deals on her phone in a voice just loud enough to be overheard. She became the most interesting person in his orbit. He was like a fish on a line. He was desperate to impress her, to prove he was more than just a lucky heir. He started boasting about the deal with the Sun-He Group, about how he was outsmarting the old-fashioned Koreans, about the genius financial structures he had set up. Imani listened, her mind a cold, perfect recording device. She'd feed him just enough rope, a compliment on his cleverness, a question that showed her feigned admiration for his risk-taking. He gave her everything: names, account numbers, timetables. But as she got closer, the risk grew. Sterling was volatile, his ego a fragile, brittle thing, and he was becoming possessive of Anaya. One evening, after a dinner where he'd had too much wine, he tried to insist on walking her to her suite. "It's late, Anaya. A beautiful woman shouldn't be walking around alone," he said, his hand reaching for her arm. It was the same gesture, the same possessive intent. Imani's blood ran cold. She sidestepped him smoothly, a dancer's move. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Sterling, but I have an early call with Hong Kong. I'm just going to head straight up." Her smile was bright, but her eyes were ice. She turned and walked away, not looking back, the hairs on her neck standing on end. He was starting to see her as a possession, just as he had seen the concierge. The mask of Anaya Locke was beginning to feel thin. The danger became concrete 2 days later. Jihan had arranged for her to attend a formal charity gala where Sterling and his Sun-Hee partners would be present. It was a perfect opportunity to observe them together. As she was getting ready, a message appeared on the burn phone. It wasn't from Jihan. It was a photo. A photo of her grandmother, Nana, sitting in a wheelchair in the hospital garden, smiling at the nurse beside her. Underneath the photo, a single line of text. "Experimental treatments can have unexpected complications. Visas can be revoked. Be careful." The air left Imani's lungs. The floor seemed to drop away. This wasn't Sterling. He wasn't that sophisticated. This was the Sun-Hee group. This was Jihan's rival. They had been watching her. They had dug into her real life, found her one vulnerability, and were now pressing a knife to it. For a full minute, she stood frozen in the center of the luxurious suite, the phone in her hand feeling as heavy as a block of lead. The beautiful dress she was about to wear, a shimmering gown of emerald green silk, suddenly felt like a costume for a fool. The rage was a white-hot flash, followed by a wave of cold, terrifying fear. They had her. They had her Nana. She sank onto the edge of the bed, her mind racing. She could run. Disappear. Jihan would understand. He would have to. Her family was on the line, but what then? The Sun-Hee group would still be there. The threat would follow her, and Nana would lose her treatment. No. Running was a death sentence. Detective Park's voice echoed in her memory. "When they corner you, Imani-ya, don't try to escape the corner. Change the shape of the room." She took a deep, shuddering breath, then another. The fear did not recede, but she walled it off, packing it into a cold, hard diamond in the center of her chest. She had the information. She knew their entire plan. The hostile takeover, the money laundering. She had the weapon to destroy them. They thought they had her cornered. They were wrong. They had just made it personal. She stood up and finished getting ready. Then she made a call. Not to Jihan. Her fingers flew across the keyboard of the encrypted laptop. She used a series of dead drops and cutouts, a path she had designed for her deepest intelligence assets back in her old life. It was a ghost network, officially decommissioned, but she knew the access codes. She sent a single, heavily encrypted data packet, a life insurance policy. Then she called Jihan. "They know," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "They have my grandmother." The silence on the other end of the line was different this time. It wasn't calculating. It was heavy, dangerous. "Where are you?" he asked. "In my suite, getting ready for the gala." "Stay there. My men will be there in 5 minutes. You are not going." "No," Imani said, her voice firm. It was the first time she had directly contradicted him. "I am going. They want me scared. They want me to run. I'm going to walk right into that ballroom and smile in their faces. We are not changing the plan. We are accelerating it. It's too dangerous." "It was always dangerous," she countered. "They think they have leverage over me. They're right. And that means they'll be overconfident. They'll feel safe. That's when we strike. But not with your men, Jihan. Not with violence. That makes them martyrs. We have to discredit them so completely that their own allies cut them loose. We make their money toxic." There was another long pause. She was overruling him. The airport concierge was telling the head of the Yongdu Pa how to fight his war. She was holding her breath. "What is your plan?" he finally asked. He didn't agree, he didn't argue. He asked for her strategy. In that moment, the dynamic between them shifted permanently. She was no longer just his asset, she was his strategist. "The gala," she said. "Your father will be there." "He is not to be involved?" "He won't be. He'll be the audience," Imani explained, her mind working faster than it ever had. "The Sun He group wants legitimacy. That's why they're at this party. We're going to take it from them. In public." The gala was a glittering affair at the Grand Hyatt. The air was thick with perfume, power, and the murmur of 100 hushed conversations. Imani entered on the arm of one of Jihan's most trusted lieutenants, a man named Mr. Choi, whose face was a granite mask. She was wearing the emerald gown. She looked like a goddess. She felt like a soldier walking into a minefield. Jihan was already there, speaking with a group of politicians. His eyes met hers across the room. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. He had deployed his men. They were everywhere, disguised as waiters, busboys, and guests. But they were her resources, not her saviors. This was her operation. She saw Sterling, standing with a stern-looking older Korean man she recognized from her research as Chairman Park of the Sun He Group. Sterling was preening, laughing too loudly. He saw her, and his face lit up. He started to move toward her. At that moment, an elderly man with a kind face approached Jihan. It was his father, Chairman Kwon. He had arrived unannounced, a power move of his own. He said something to Jihan, his eyes scanning the room. Imani felt a chill. The pieces on the board were moving in unexpected ways. Her plan had relied on Chairman Kwon being a distant observer. His presence here changed the geometry of the threat. As Sterling approached her, his path was intercepted by a waiter carrying a tray of champagne flutes. The waiter was efficient, unobtrusive, but Imani's eyes, trained for threat assessment, caught the details. The way he held the tray, too rigid. The unnatural bulge under the left side of his jacket. The way his eyes weren't on the guests, but were tracking Chairman Kwon's slow progress across the room. He wasn't a waiter, he was an assassin, and his target wasn't Jihan. It was the old man. The Sun He group wasn't just planning a corporate takeover. They were planning a decapitation strike. Everything happened in a fraction of a second. The assassin began to move, closing the distance to Chairman Kwon. Jihan was on his father's other side, his back partially turned. He wouldn't see it in time. His men were too far away. Imani didn't think, she acted. She broke away from Mr. Choi, moving with a sudden, shocking speed. "Oh, how clumsy of me!" she exclaimed, her voice high and flustered. She tripped, lurching forward, not toward the assassin, but toward the chairman. Her body, clad in emerald silk, slammed into the old man, sending him staggering sideways, out of the path the assassin was taking. Simultaneously, her arm shot out, not to steady herself, but to sweep a tray of appetizers from a nearby table. The tray, laden with delicate canapes, flew through the air and crashed into the assassin's chest. It all looked like a chaotic, embarrassing accident. A clumsy guest in high heels. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sterling froze, his mouth open. Jihan spun around, his face a mask of cold fury, instantly understanding. In the chaos, as security rushed forward, Imani saw it. A glint of steel falling from the assassin's hand. A thin, silenced pistol clattering unnoticed under a table. Jihan's men were on the assassin in a heartbeat, hustling him out of the room before anyone truly registered what had happened. Jihan was at his father's side, his hand on the old man's arm, his eyes blazing. He looked across the manufactured chaos, at the spilled food, the startled guests, and at Imani now being helped to her feet by Mr. Choi, playing the part of the mortified, apologetic guest. Their eyes met. No words were exchanged, none were needed. She had seen the threat he had missed. She had saved his father's life. Protection had flowed both ways. The debt was balanced. Now it was time to end the war. The final confrontation was not set in a boardroom. It was set in a place of art and culture, a private gallery owned by the Kwon family, known for its collection of priceless Joseon dynasty porcelain. The Sun He group, including Chairman Park and a very confused Sterling, had been summoned for a final negotiation regarding the port. They arrived expecting to dictate terms. They walked into the main gallery. The space was minimalist, serene. White walls, polished concrete floors. In the center of the room, on illuminated pedestals, sat ancient moon jars, their milky white surfaces glowing with an inner light. And standing beside the most valuable jar in the collection were Chairman Kwan and Kwan Jihan. Between them stood Imani. She was not wearing a gown or a suit. She was wearing a hanbok, a modern interpretation, but unmistakable. The chima, the high-waisted skirt, was the color of midnight, and the jogari, the short jacket, was a deep, lustrous sapphire silk. Her hair was styled in an elegant, traditional updo, held in place by a single, unadorned jade pin. She looked like she belonged there. She looked like royalty. Sterling saw her first. His face went through a rapid series of emotions: confusion, shock, and finally, a dawning, horrified recognition. The suit, the accent, the name Anaya Locke, it all dissolved, and he was left staring at the airport concierge, the woman he had humiliated. "You," he whispered, the word catching in his throat. Chairman Park of the Sun-hee Group ignored him. His eyes were on Chairman Kwan. "You requested this meeting," he said, his voice hard. "Let us dispense with the theatrics." Chairman Kwan did not speak. He simply gestured toward Imani. Imani stepped forward. She addressed Chairman Park in perfect formal Korean. "Thank you for coming, Park Hwee-jong-nim." Then she turned her eyes to Sterling, and she switched to English. "Mr. Sterling, we last met at Incheon Airport. You may not remember. You were indisposed, and I was wearing a different uniform." Sterling was white as a sheet. I don't know what this is about. This is insane." "Is it?" Imani's voice was calm, conversational. She began to walk slowly around the pedestals, her silk skirt whispering against the floor. "Is it insane that a company like Sterling Applied Dynamics, with a declared net income of $12 million, suddenly has access to a $400 million credit line from a series of anonymous shell corporations based in the Cayman Islands? Is it insane that those funds are being funneled directly into an attempt to manipulate stock prices for a hostile takeover of the Busan Port Authority?" She wasn't looking at a screen. She didn't have notes. The information was a part of her. She recited account numbers, transaction dates, and the specific statutes of both Korean financial law and the American Foreign Corrupt Practices Act that they had violated. Her delivery was cold, precise, and utterly devastating. She was dismantling his life, piece by piece, with her words. This is corporate espionage," Sterling sputtered, turning to his Korean partners for support. "She stole this information." Chairman Park's face was stone. "This is a fabrication." "Is it?" Imani stopped in front of the main moon jar. She ran a single gentle finger over its cool, ancient surface. "Is it also a fabrication that you intended to default on your payment to Mr. Sterling, using a subsidiary to declare bankruptcy the day after the takeover was complete, leaving him with a worthless company and the full attention of the SEC? We have the emails, the ones you thought were deleted from your server." Sterling's head snapped toward Park. Betrayal, raw and ugly, contorted his features. "What is she talking about?" Park ignored him, his eyes locked on Imani, on the two Kwan men standing like silent sentinels. He knew he was trapped. "You have no proof." "Proof is for courts," Jihan said, speaking for the first time. His voice was soft, but it echoed in the silent gallery. "We prefer consequences." Sterling panicked. He lunged not at Imani, but toward Chairman Kwan. "Listen to me. This is a misunderstanding. I can fix this. Name your price. I'll give you anything." He was begging, his arrogance shattered, revealing the terrified, inadequate man beneath. Chairman Kwan didn't even look at him. His gaze was on Imani. It was her victory. It was her call. Imani looked at Sterling, the memory of his fingers bruising her wrist, the sneer on his face. "Didn't see you there." She saw him now, small, pathetic, broken. Her voice was a deadly quiet whisper. "We don't want your money, Mr. Sterling." She gestured at the documents Jihan was now holding out. "We own your company. The board was convened for an emergency vote this morning. They were very receptive to our offer, especially after we showed them your plans to loot the pension fund." The finality of it hit him. His company, his money, his life. It was all gone. He sank to his knees. Chairman Park tried to bluster, to threaten, but two of Jihan's men stepped out of the shadows. There was no violence. They simply flanked him. The authorities, a special prosecutor's unit Jihan had on his payroll, were waiting outside, but they were the cleanup crew. The war had been won here, in this room, by her. 6 months later, the boardroom overlooked the sprawling, chaotic, beautiful expanse of the port of Busan. Cranes moved like graceful metal dinosaurs, plucking containers from massive ships. The air smelled of salt, diesel, and global commerce. Imani stood at the head of a long, polished table. She was not wearing a hanbok. She wore a tailored gray suit, a stark white shirt, and an expression of absolute command. On the massive screen behind her were logistics charts, shipping manifests, and profit projections. She was speaking in a rapid-fire mix of English and fluent Busan Korean, her tone sharp, questioning, decisive, and the throughput is unacceptable. We are losing 2 hours per ship at berth 4. I want a full diagnostic on the crane automation, and I want it by end of day. No excuses. The room was filled with men, seasoned, grizzled executives who had worked this port their entire lives. They were all older than her, and they were all listening with rapt, respectful attention. They called her Imani Bu-Huejang Nim, Vice Chairwoman Imani. Kwon Jihan entered the room silently and stood at the back, leaning against the wall. He didn't speak or interrupt. He just watched her. He watched her command his empire. A rare, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. It was the smile of a man watching his best decision at work. Later, they stood on a private balcony overlooking the sea, the evening breeze cool and clean. Nana was in full remission. She lived in a beautiful seaside apartment not 2 miles from where they stood, and Imani visited her every day. The mountain was gone. In its place was an ocean of possibility. Jihan handed her a steaming cup of green tea. The silence between them was comfortable, familiar, an intimacy built not on words, but on shared battles and mutual respect. The elders were skeptical, he said, his gaze on the horizon. They saw a foreigner, a woman. They did not understand. Imani watched a freighter glide out toward the open sea. And now? They see the 5% increase in quarterly profits, he replied, a hint of dry humor in his voice. They are not skeptical anymore. She smiled, a real, genuine smile. Dignity isn't given, Jihan. It's taken. He turned to her, his cold eyes now holding a warmth reserved only for her. Some people have to take it, he said quietly. Others, like you, just have to remind the world it was always there. He looked at her, truly seeing her, the woman in the suit, the warrior in the hanbok, the survivor in the uniform, the pawn who had become a queen. She had found her place, not in a country or a city, but in the quiet, profound space of being fully seen, fully valued. She was home. When the world tries to make you invisible, how loud do you have to be seen?